Now that's a damn fine game. Oh yeah, not even Little Caesars $5 hot and readies are safe from inflation.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's what I was getting from it.
Hello and welcome to the Hitbox Detective Gamecast. I'm your host, Ben Scott. This is going to be a review discussion for the 2022 remake of the Japanese role-playing game Live Alive by Square Enix. Joining me for this discussion is assistant editor for lordsofgaming.net, Joe Repko, aka Lord Flame. Thank you for joining me today, Joe.
Thank you for having me, as always. It was a great discussion the last time around for Triangle Strategy, and it's great to be able to talk with you once again on another awesome entry in the 2D HD JRPGs that they're doing over there at Square Enix.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think that review discussion ended with you saying, hopefully we can do this again for Live Alive. So
my dreams came true. Thank you.
Hey, no, it was a great discussion. And as soon as I saw what Live Alive was going to be and I played the demo, I was like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. We got to do it.
Oh yeah.
So if you're unfamiliar, the way that I do these review discussions, Spoilercast, is we have a top-down review discussion of the game and then have a brief spoiler-free discussion of the story. After that, we dive into a deeper spoiler discussion of the story and give our thoughts on the plot, characters, and gameplay, and then we end with our final thoughts and review scores. But really quick, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I wanted to ask you, Joe, how do you pronounce Live Alive?
Okay, so technically I've always thought it was Live Alive, and Google technically agrees with me, because I actually looked it up, and there was a couple of articles that said, it's pronounced Live Alive, but at the same time, people say Live Alive, like you've been saying. So I'm just gonna go with Live Alive, and people can say whatever it wants, to be honest. You know?
Yes, yeah, I've heard. So I heard that during when Nintendo had a direct, and they said that it was coming out, and the announcer said Live Alive, and then people that have lived in Japan and speak Japanese say it's Live Alive, because it's supposed to be Live a Life, and. But I don't know. So I think it's something where the jury's still out.
Probably a translation error or something like that, you know?
Yeah. But, nevertheless, I was interested about that because the whole time I've been flip-flopping. At first I was Live Alive, and then I heard someone say Live Alive, and I was saying that for a little while and trying to correct myself, and then I just defaulted back. It's it's when you pronounce a Pokemon's name a certain way, and then you hear that it's pronounced differently, and then it's hard to correct that going forward. I used to say Arceus, and then I heard it was Arceus. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it took that, what was it, that game that came out recently this year too, Pokemon Legends, to get that fixed for a lot of people too, because they also thought it was Arceus or something like that.
Yeah. So. I heard someone say Arceus because it's Zeus, the god Pokemon. Yeah. And I was like, okay, yeah. But, I wasn't going to argue with the guy on it. I was like, hey, that's interesting. I never thought of that, so.
It's just an enunciation. It's not a big deal, but.
Yeah, totally. Well, anyway, we're getting into the weeds here. So let's go ahead and dive into the top-down review discussion. And remember, this is the spoiler-free section. I kind of wrote a brief description of how the game functions, but if there's anything you want to interject or you feel like I'm missing something, feel free to jump in. You can interrupt me. I don't care.
No problem.
So, Live Alive is made up of several stories, each with its own hero and era in time, spanning from prehistory through the distant future. The turn-based combat and adventure-style gameplay are ubiquitous throughout the experience. However, each story leverages these intrinsic aspects in unique ways. Some are more combat-driven, while others are more adventure-driven. How did you feel about the combat, the adventure elements throughout the experience?
I thought after I started with the Twilight of Edo Japan story, I thought that was probably one of the better stories in it, until I played the, I think it was the near future. We'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. I thought the way the gameplay was presented in that was kind of unique, because you had some stealth elements, but you also had more puzzle-ish kind of things. And then whenever you go to, say, the Wild West story, it's more like a simplistic, it's kind of like a straight shot thing with only one actual combat encounter in that story. So it's kind of, they make sure that each one feels unique while also feeling similar. Like the gameplay, I'm sure we'll get to later, is kind of static across the board, but everything else surrounding it's always going to be kind of different.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was super interesting how they balance the different, like, if I think if throughout the entire experience, if each chapter played exactly the same with how many chapters there are, it would have gotten a little stagnant. But
Oh yeah,
there being like something like the Wild West segment that is very adventure driven, and even the distant future very adventure driven, but then something like present day that's like strictly combat driven
yep.
was super interesting and kept everything feeling fresh, sometimes to a detriment, and we'll get into that when we get in later on. Like, I think some aspects felt like they were maybe like either they were shorter in length but also just felt like shorter in content, and almost kind of felt like, why is this even here?
Yeah.
But overall, really enjoyed it. The combat itself, like the turn-based combat, I don't know, do you feel like it was a little on the shallow side?
Not particularly. I feel like it's whatever you're looking at. Well, I kind of want to say yes to a certain degree, but at the same time, no, because there's enough around in the customization and item usage kind of scenario that happens during the final part of the game that kind of makes it feel a little bit more deep, considering how much you can mix and match and all that kind of stuff. But whenever I first saw the combat in a trailer, I was actually kind of interested. I think during the triangle strategy discussion, I was kind of talking about that too, how the combat looked very interesting. I wasn't sure how it was going to work, but then once I got my hands on it, it was kind of like simple, kind of like a Mega Man Battle Network mixed in with some of the tactical style of something like a Octopath Traveler or a Triangle Strategy kind of mixed in. It was a good combat system, and it gets deeper near the very end to a degree, but it never really wowed me, I guess. But there is some detriments to that combat that, in terms of difficulty, that I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The battle network like analogy, that's really good, because at one point I did like think about that, but then I think I kind of forgot about it. So the fact that you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, like it does feel similar to that. And I feel like there were times throughout the experience where I was like, oh man, like I feel like some of the chapters utilize this combat better than in other areas and or in other chapters, and maybe that is, maybe if they had gone for example, some of them I felt like didn't ask me to use as much equipment or like attachable items, and so in those instances maybe I was like kind of like losing sight of the forest for the trees, in that I was feeling like, oh man, this combat feels a little simple or too easy. And there are some like crazy difficulty spikes, like
Oh yeah,
even just a random encounter out of nowhere can be way more difficult than any other encounter you experience, and then the one after that will be way easy. And I know
yeah.
that's kind of the point of random encounters, but
Well, there's certain elements in it, like we're talking about, like how some of it didn't really require you to use like equipment or anything like that, because the distant future, whenever it's literally just, it's kind of just one combat encounter overall in that entire um, story, so you get to enjoy the story more, which I did. It was a really good story,
so good.
but it was the fact that you didn't get a chance to really customize the character from that at all, and it really felt like the abilities and the boss were kind of in tandem with one another. Like you only had to focus on defeating certain things and then kill the boss, but only have to heal a couple times. It just felt a little bit too easy for that. So that's probably where I would say was the most shallow in that regard. So
Yeah. Outside of that, each of these stories, I think there are some, you know, that I like you said, like the distant future. That story was awesome.
oh
Like
yeah, it was dark. It had kind of like that alien vibe to it. Like
very much so. Yeah.
they all have like their specific, I guess, quirks. Like for the stories, like Distant Future has its own like alien vibe. It's kind of like horror, kind of stealthish kind of stuff. And again, like in the Wild West, it's kind of like a straight shot, and then you have like that one showdown, and then it's yeah,
I think that the way that there is this kind of, you're in these different eras throughout time, and there is this connective tissue of humanity throughout it that I really enjoyed. And I was really surprised at, how, tight these stories are told, or like, they're not like, some of them aren't very drawn out, but they have like a really poignant message tucked into it. And I think a lot of people will look at Live Alive and not view it as kind of like an unassuming game. I think a lot of people tend to write off pixel art HD 2D style things as maybe not like I don't want to say like a real game, but it's not like on the scale of like a Forbidden West or a God of War. But then you start scratching the surface and you go hands on, and you can't really judge these games by their cover or by the trailer. You really do need to go hands on. That's something personally I've really learned this year, branching out. Like I had never played a turn-based strategy game until Triangle Strategy, and then picked it up and played it. Yeah, and it's my game of the year.
Same. Nothing has dethroned it yet, and I'm hoping this later half of the year with everything coming out that it might have some competition, but probably won't. But with what you were saying though, like for the last couple of years, like I have been waiting for a game to engross me in its story to the degree where it has like multiple branching paths, and I actually want to see everything that happens and understand every single character, even the terrible ones like Triangle Strategy did. Whenever I play other games, like I'm playing the Diofield Chronicle on Xbox right now, and I'm just not feeling that same level of engagement at all. Like it's just like whenever people look at the 2D HD style, they're like, and then whenever you actually play them, it's the impression that the story and gameplay has on you rather than that presentation, which I still believe Triangle Strategy has amazing art direction. So
yeah, and Live Alive is right up there for me.
oh yeah,
I think that there are games that I enjoyed more. Like I think I enjoy the expanse of something like Triangle Strategy more than Live Alive, but I definitely think like Live Alive isn't a game I would suggest anyone skip. If you play Switch
definitely.
and you want to also have like a good understanding of the games. I know that Live Alive is a remake of a game from, I forget what year the original came out.
I had to look it up for the review on Lords of Gaming. It was 1994, and it
Okay.
was stuck literally in Japan only on the Super Famicom. So
Yeah.
that's
So
that's a shame, really. Like it should have went everywhere, and I'm glad that it has now. So
yes. Yeah. So, it's particularly in the United States, this is really, outside of being somebody that understands how to read Japanese, and it also imported a copy of the game. This is for most people the first time playing their game. So I think it can be considered in the game of the year conversation. And I think that to really have a thorough understanding of the games that came out this year, something like Live Alive, or Live Alive particularly, should be played and considered pretty heavily, because it's a really interesting, really cool game, unlike anything I've played ever
oh
before.
yeah, definitely. Like the way that they have each of the stories, that it's like very. Sometimes it felt like very hopeful. Like whenever it came to like the distant future, and they were making the technology for the ship, like we see it in a lot of sci-fi stuff, and then they actually look at some of the stuff that they're using in space and some of the space stations, and you're kind of like, yeah, this actually looks a little bit similar. So it's kind of like they were very hopeful at that time, looking at where technology was going. It was actually kind of cool seeing what they did with all of it.
Yeah. And also, some of these stories, underratedly funny.
Oh yeah, like I think you were having a whale of a time with the prehistoric era,
Oh
which
my god, that is definitely. There is stuff in that I'm surprised that I'm glad that they faithfully remade it and just
yeah,
made it. That would be the thing I would be interested for someone to do is say, did they tweak it at all? Or is it like a shot for shot, line for line remake of the original, just
that's what I want to see
translated?
too, because there there's something to be said about the way that games are being made nowadays. How some of the stuff has to be like, or some stuff has to be cut out or tweaked to make sure that it's not um, offending certain people. I'm not saying that oh, everybody's like sensitive or something like that, but it really feels like a product of its time, and to actually go through and remake everything. Like there were certain moments in the prehistoric era, especially at that ending, where I was kind of like, excuse me,
Yeah.
where I was like, but at the same time, it's like I understand what they were doing with that, and it was part of the story that they wanted to tell, and I'm glad that they were able to do that. And like, what was it? There was that one moment when the monkey farted near the fire, and like I literally started cackling like a maniac whenever I saw that scene. It was so hilarious.
Yeah, so good. And I love that, this isn't a real spoiler, but just like it's a move that the caveman that you play as in prehistory has. It's what was it? Stinky Poot, or
Yeah,
yeah, or Stink Poot or something. That was like one of the moves. And
an underrated move too, like really underrated. Like I had to like one of the mini boss encounters. I literally had to use only that because if I got anywhere near it, it would have wrecked me. So,
yeah, yeah, and all of the moves and their descriptions are all like written in like caveman talk.
yeah, pretty
It's
much.
like,
And there was no dialogue in that story either, so that was also really cool.
yeah,
So
all communicated through like weird grunts and like little like text box like emoticons
yep,
almost, and just it's so cool and like really well
very
crafted.
very creative.
Yeah. And really quick, we can move on to like the visuals and audio. I think this is a good segue because like some of these levels, I think like Twilight of Edo Japan, beautiful. Like I'm using a screenshot from it as like the backdrop from here because like just like the color palette and the pixel art and the sprite work and just I mean phenomenal. What are your thoughts?
Well, to complement the Twilight of Age of Japan, like I said, it's like one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite stories because of like certain scenes in it. There was that one moment whenever you were kind of like going along like the rooftops, and like you saw like uh, the fortress basically expanding before your eyes. It's kind of like it's so stunning, especially for the art style. I really like
Yeah.
where they went with that.
I think of that. I think of some of the beats in the near future where, I don't want to spoil anything in it, but there's some moments in that. Some of the sequences in the distant future where you're like, it's like the camera's moving throughout the ship were
Oh
really
yeah,
cool.
I noticed that. Like we both play triangle strategy. I was really hoping that they could have done something similar to like this isn't going to be a spoiler. Whenever you get to the village in or well the town in the Wild West chapter, they do like these little panning shots of like the constantly moving environment, like the with tumbleweeds and everything like that. It's
Yeah.
really these little random shots throughout it to kind of help set up that area. I would have really loved to see that kind of stuff in something like Triangle Strategy or Octopath Traveler, even just for some of its story beats. Not overuse it, obviously, but
Yeah.
the way that they did it in the Wild West and the distant future really complemented what they were trying to do by setting up those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Live Alive really does showcase what HD 2D can do and can be. And I really think that like Square Enix has something really special with what they're doing with these HD 2D games. I'm really looking forward to playing more new stuff and hopefully like remakes of old things that I never got a chance to play, stuff like Live Alive. Did they do Chrono Cross in HD 2D? Is that how that was remade?
No, I think it was just like a straight up remaster, but I would love to see that in a 2D HD remake. I think they're doing. No, they are doing a 2D HD remake for Dragon Quest 3 though for the Switch.
That's right.
No date, obviously, but I hope to see it soon because it looked really great. So
yeah, it's so cool. So, yeah, like all of that stuff. Like, you know, it's funny because until this year, the last game by Square Enix, I think that was published by Square Enix that I had played was maybe Final Fantasy 15, and you know, this year has really opened up my eyes, and now I'm like looking forward to Tactics Ogre Reborn, and I'm just like, yeah, bring all the Square Enix JRPGs my way. I will play all of them, and Live Alive is something that like I'm so happy to have in my library now.
Yeah, because I've kind of grown up kind of seeing JRPGs more or less just being kind of like these tactical turn-based kind of experiences, and I understand why they're going in the direction for action and some of their more popular titles, but I just really want them to stay at the heart of what they used to make, because I feel like there's something special about that experience and what they could provide to somebody at a younger age that could shape their taste for the future. So
yeah, agreed. The voice acting and the music, like the soundtrack in the game, I think while I'm glad that the voice acting is there, because while I think it's there's a level of like, yeah, sure, just let me read it. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would just like turn the voice acting off and just read through it, but I kind of like it. You know, I know that it's not perfect. I think a lot of people would probably be like, yeah, the voice acting is terrible, but I kind of enjoyed it, and I thought the soundtrack had some bangers in it. But what did you think?
So for voice acting directly, I didn't actually have a problem with the voice acting. One thing I did notice, and I'm not sure if it was maybe something that I just did wrong whenever I was going through the menus, whenever you select a character and you stick with the pre-designated name like Cube or Oboromaru or Akira, the game will not say those names anyways. Like I thought. So that happened to you too. Okay, so it was just me. Okay, I'm not crazy. Awesome. And I found that to be very disappointing, because it's like they're very cool names. Like I'm sorry, I really love Akira as a name, but with the voice acting, like there were some moments where you could tell that the voice actors were trying just a little bit too hard, but I would have taken that over some instances of voice acting like in Triangle Strategy for somebody like Gila. I'm glad that there was nothing like that in this game. I appreciated that. Not trying to attack anyone, I just love the effort that was put into it. And for the music, I really did love like most of the soundtrack. I thought some of it was kind of meh at times, but the combat scenarios for stuff like Indo Japan or Imperial China especially, I loved that sound. I loved that battle theme. That was incredible.
Yeah.
And I always loved the very ending of every chapter's boss theme. I don't know what it is about it, but it just felt so retro, and I love that they kind of uplifted the entire soundtrack with an actual orchestra instead of keeping it kind of like the I actually listened to some of the older tracks. They're mostly synthwave, but that was kind of like the product of its time, so I couldn't really blame anybody for that. I love the way that they remade all of those tracks. It's really, and especially that very final track. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting it to go that hard. So.
Yeah, I
really loved it.
The battle music during Prehistory started getting a little on my nerves, because it's just like that same guitar solo just over and over. But outside of that, like I was pumping gas and just like humming the Near Future song. Dude, oh my god, so good. But outside of audio, video, story, and gameplay, did you experience any game breaking issues, technical glitches, anything like that?
Not really, actually. Like,
Yeah.
I'm noticing this with like the 2D HD style. I think considering it's more limited in scope, they can keep it very polished, so to speak. I actually love that. There was never like there were some noticeable frame rate drops. Like if you were to use like I think it was a Boromaru's uh, fire tornado move. The where it's kind of like it kind of like creates like these flaming tornadoes. It kind of tanks the frame rate just a little bit,
I know what you're talking
and
about. Yeah.
so some moves can tank the frame rate. So I don't know if that's just like a Switch limitation or if it's a engine limitation. But that's the only time that I've ever noticed the game to have any performance issues. In fact, I actually think this might be the best performing and best in image clarity that I've actually seen from the 2D HD style. Like I think I said like during our triangle strategy discussion, like even in docked or console mode, or sorry, docked or handheld mode, it would be kind of blurry. And with Live Alive, I tried it with both, docked and handheld mode as well, and they were crystal clear. It was actually a really beautiful presentation. So it just seems like a genuine evolution for what they're doing in that style.
Yeah. That's something that it's just now dawning on me that I never played it in handheld. And I bet on my OLED, I bet it's going to look great. So I need to go back and give that a shot.
Yeah, I only really tried the handheld mode whenever I had to use the restroom or anything like that. I'm never really going to like take it out of the dock if I'm just sitting on the couch. I just don't find the purpose in that personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I am very much a docked Switch with a Pro controller kind of. That's how I play. Everything is basically like a console. I'm not the biggest handheld gamer, especially because for the most part I'm capturing footage, and so
Yeah.
I can't do that if it's in handheld mode. And I've never had the gameplay capture going and then taken the Switch out of the dock and then try to put it back in and see if it just picks right back up. I've never tested that, so that's something maybe one day I'll do just to like see what happens. That kind of wraps up the review discussion part of it. So at this point, if you have not played the game and you don't want the game spoiled for you in any way, pause the video now, go play the game if what we've said makes you want to go play it, and then come back when you're ready for the Spoilercast section. But if you've played the game and you're here for both, stick around because we're going to dive right into that. Before we transition out, did you have any last thoughts you want to impart to the people that haven't played it?
Well, I think it's a very unique experience, and considering this game is on the Nintendo Switch, if any of the listeners or viewers are interested, you can actually just download the demo and actually play the half of three of the stories that are in the game, and they are kind of the better stories that you could experience. So
yeah, Distant Future sold me on it. I remember kind of. I played Twilight of Edo Japan, and I was kind of like, okay, like I get this. I think what it's doing is cool. I like some of the stealth aspects of it. But then I fired up Distant Future, and I was like, wait, hold on. I didn't even finish the demo chapter. I was like, I know that I'm buying this game now, so let me just stop here, and I didn't even load my save. I was like, I want to play it from the very beginning, all the way through, and not even worry about my save file. Let's just take it from the top, and really enjoyed it. But okay, so for the Spoilercast section, we're going to go through each chapter in chronicle order, starting with reading through the plot and then giving our thoughts on the chapter before moving on to the next one. And we're going to start with kind of like the oldest in chronological order, so like prehistory all the way through Distant Future, and so on. In the name of full transparency, I did lift these plot descriptions from the Live Alive wiki on fandom.com, just to save time. I figure me trying to go through and rewrite all of the stuff, I may have missed something because some of them I hadn't played for like over 2 weeks. So I just went ahead and took it from there. Go to fandom.com, check out their wiki. Really great little plot write-ups and other information about characters and stuff. It's really cool. All of their Japanese names and yeah, really cool. Anyway, let's start with prehistory. In prehistoric times, a tribe of cavemen prepare to sacrifice a woman named Baru to their deity, a living Tyrannosaurus Rex named Odo. She escapes to the south and hides in a cave belonging to another tribe, stealing their food to survive. She is discovered by a young caveman named Pogo, who falls in love with her and decides to help her hide from the rest of the tribe. The Northern Ku tribe attacks to retrieve her, but Pogo repels them. However, Baru is discovered in the process, and the elders exile them along with Gori, Pogo's gorilla friend. Eventually, Pogo is forced to fight Odo, or Odio, I'm not sure, and is assisted by a warrior of the northern tribe named Zaki. After the beast is defeated, peace is established between the two tribes. Joe, what were your thoughts on prehistory?
The thing that made it stand out the most that we said earlier was the fact that it was kind of like a no dialogue story. Like, it was just nothing but grunts, groans, and literally just emojis. So they basically relied mostly on expressions, character movement, and other things. There's a lot of comedic aspects to it, and whenever you get out into the gameplay segments of it, something I like is the fact that it didn't have like completely random enemy encounters. It had like you sniffed out the beast that you were going after, and I really liked how they did that. There was one segment in it. It was whenever the what was the lady's name again? I'm sorry. It's
Baru.
Whenever she got captured again from Zati, they kind of trap you in that certain area until you're able to defeat him. But the previous time that you went against him was whenever you had the monkey and Peru, as well as Pogo. So you were just Pogo against Zati, and it literally became like this crazy difficulty spike that I was kind of like just getting frustrated by. I was really enjoying the story, but...
Was that thunder?
Yeah, might have been thunder or lightning. Anyways, let's move on from that.
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry. I told you. Sorry, listeners or readers. You can probably cut like that out. I really did love what they were doing with the entire thing. It was just the crazy difficulty spike, and the crafting system was kind of meh in my opinion. Like, you could create certain things, but it was kind of like how many times you had to fight something to get the materials to experiment with what could be made. It just kind of felt a little off to me. And the final encounter, like, you get to fight a freaking T-Rex. That's pretty cool. So
yeah, I agree. The moments where, like, taking, you know, the lack of, like, or like thinking of it as these cavemen wouldn't be communicating. They don't have language, so we have to communicate in another means, and leaning on humor as a way of communicating the story and kind of turning it into a comedy really made it stand out in that regard. There were, you know, it's not my favorite section of the game, and that difficulty spike you're describing, I remember kind of being like, oh, crap. I felt a little trapped, and I was like, I just have to outsmart this guy. And that was a boss that I literally just like hung back and used stink poot over and over and just kept my distance. Same. And just had to cheese him.
I just hated the fact that this is something that happens a couple of times in the game, and I just wish that there was kind of like the warning that you would see in modern games that was kind of like this point of no return. Make sure that you were prepared before entering the zone or something like that. I mean, at least give me the warning to be like, okay, I'll save here and then see what happens, and then revert back to the save if I'm not prepared or something like that. But the fact that it wasn't, and they kind of just... Because whenever you fought him previously, like, you had both Garu and her as well, so it was kind of like they they gave you like the expectation like you would have like your team always to kind of defeat this boss, and then it was just kind of just you, and you don't have an ability to heal, and you just had to go around and just like fart. And I guess that kind of makes sense because wasn't like right after that combat encounter like it ended with Pogo just kind of like pooting, and then the guy just kind of like keeling over or something like that. I think I remember
Yeah.
that happening, so that's probably the intention, but it was just kind of like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely a little frustrating, and maybe it's something that they could have given like a quality of life improvement, when they were remaking it, but maybe they were like, no, we're just gonna leave this game as is and just kind of give it a facelift. And but that was a moment where afterwards, every opportunity I had to grind a little bit, I took it.
Yeah.
I kind of chalked it up to a learning lesson with the game of like, don't run from enemy encounters, don't try to avoid them, embrace the random encounters, and just I kind of looked at it like I was playing a Pokemon game where I was like, I want this experience, I want to be stronger than everybody I'm going to go up against, just because that's how I play games like that. If you put like
Yeah.
difficulty hinged on experience and leveling up, I'm gonna grind it out by just embracing every encounter that comes my way.
Yeah.
And
Completely agree there.
yeah, but overall, I think good section of the game, a good entry point to kind of be like, oh, okay, this is because I did play this story first. I played it in like chronological order. Do you remember when you went back and played Prehistory?
I think I did it right after. So my playthrough for the demo, I picked up right where I was after the demo. I transferred my save. I finished Twilight of Edo Japan, then Imperial China, and then Distant Future, and then went straight to Prehistoric, and then I'm actually trying to remember what was next for me on that one.
Yeah.
It's been a bit. Sorry.
Hey, no, you're okay. The ending for Prehistory, that was a moment.
Yeah.
I messaged you right after it. I was like, I just finished Prehistory. I don't know. I was basically like, that ending, dude. Like, what is up with that?
Yeah. I'm not. Obviously, we're gonna leave that up for the viewer, but there's like
Yeah.
something that happens at the very end. It's definitely implied, but at the same time, it's kind of like, excuse me, this is a child. Can we tone it down just a little bit?
Yeah.
Just a little bit, please.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
But I mean, if luckily it was implied, like who knows,
Yeah,
but I think
could.
we all know what was happening, but I thought at least it was, it's hard to say tastefully done, like
Yeah.
at least it was implied, and
Yeah.
not gross.
They really pushed the T for teen rating in this game. They really pushed that to the limit.
Yeah, even with some of the language.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that later. Trust me.
Yeah.
That was a great time.
Well, we can move on to Imperial China, the successor. In ancient China, an old kung fu master of the Earth and Heart kung fu tradition takes on 3 students to pass on his art before he dies. While the master is away one day, the dojo is attacked by a rival dojo seeking revenge for an insult. 2 of the students are killed, the surviving student being the one the player trained the most, prompting the master and the surviving student to avenge their deaths. The rival school, led by Odi Wan Lee, is defeated, but the master dies afterward, having used the last of his strength in the fight. The student succeeds him as master of the tradition and takes a new generation of students. Personally, Imperial China, one of my favorite chapters. But what did you think of Imperial China?
Pretty much the same. I liked how they were able to basically create a character that was kind of overpowered, in my opinion. Like they basically put you up against like 3 people that didn't have a lot of training, and you kind of just beat the crud out of them. I'm trying to be safe with my terminology here.
Yeah.
But whenever it takes the turn with the attack in the dojo, like I literally was kind of shocked to see just how far they went with that scene alone, because I didn't realize I don't know if it was different for you, but I trained. I'm blanking on a lot of their names. Uh,
Yeah.
I trained the lady that you fight the first time
Oh,
around.
okay.
So I trained her the most, and trained the other two, thinking that it would have been like using all four of them, and I could rely on her a little bit more. But I didn't know that. It seems like the one that you train the most is the only one that survives, and the other two perish.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't
Was
know
it?
that going into it. So I was training what I considered to be the weakest of the three, which was, I think his name was June, the one with the purple headband.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I trained him the most. And after I found out that that's how that was going to play out, I was like, dang, I kind of wanted the guy that was always talking about food. I can't remember his
yeah.
name.
I can't remember his name either. Like it's so bad. I definitely should have written down the names or something like that. But
Yeah, we played it so
so
long ago at this
yeah,
point.
yeah. So yours was the weak link June. So
Yeah.
so that one stays. So for anybody that just hasn't gotten around to it, like literally train like the one that you really believe in the most, the one that you like the most. Otherwise, they're gonna perish. And I actually kind of like that because it wasn't like, oh, they're just unconscious. Like, no, they're dead. They're
Yeah.
dead. And then I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. But, and, unfortunately, sometimes something like that fuels somebody to step up to the plate. And I think it's cool for that angle because, it's like the woman whose name I can't remember, she had something to prove. So if you end up training her the most, you basically just get her to prove what she, is setting out to prove. If you train up the guy that's always talking about food, he kind of has this like troubled past of like stealing food and doing stuff. He kind of has like a street kid kind of vibe.
Yeah, he just wanted to kind of prove that he wasn't just like a fat slob. Like he did have some merit to himself. He just needed somebody to train him, and that's what I loved about the Shifu story. Like he realized that he's not long for this earth, so he wants to find disciples, and he finds them in the most unexpected way and takes them in.
Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to see was, if I ever had a chance to replay this, was if you refused June completely, would he have actually been part of the overall story? Like, I actually wanted to see if that was,
Oh.
because I rejected him at first, but then they had like a second opportunity to recruit him, and I was just like, whatever, might as well.
I did the
So
same thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that the Shifu sees the potential in these three kids and helps them realize their potential. And no matter,
well, at least one of them.
yeah,
God, I'm sorry, that's dark.
yeah, it is dark, but I mean, along the way, like I think, when he's talking to the guy, the food obsessed guy, he is very much like he sees like like the way you're built is a attribute. Like it's something that if you channel your like if you look at that as like you have potential and you can utilize this to you're stronger than most people, that's a benefit that you have. And this guy just totally didn't see that in himself, like thought it was his weakness. And
Yep, that's a good message. It really is.
yeah, and to be in a game from 1994, is very forward and thinking, and I think that it was really cool of them to, like, I don't know, the way that each of these like heroes and their kind of either their their mentors or the people that they're learning from, the way that they communicate either some sort of like forgiveness or like unlocking your potential and love and like all of this, the stuff that I think is kind of countering the through line of all the stories, which we'll get to when we get to the end.
Yeah.
I think Imperial China is one of the stories that does that incredibly well. And I think that's why it's one of my favorites, is that it did that so well.
Plus, it's killer battle theme. Like I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
it is.
it has that stereotypical jingle in the soundtrack itself, but everything else is just like
Yeah.
it's a chef's kit. It's just
Yeah.
mwah.
Yeah. Agreed. Very good. And I think that the end fight, where you do learn, what was it, oh crap, what was the name of that move? It's like heavens something.
Yeah, the one where you basically turn to like four different people and just attack
Yes.
all at once. Like, I
Yeah.
hate that it's the move that you can only use like once during that fight, but it was kind of like you whittle down the health bar to the point where you know that's going to kill him and just use that. It
Yeah.
just feels satisfying. I love that
Yes.
move.
Yeah. So good. I ended up using that a lot later on, and
Yep.
we'll get to that. But
You kind of had to. Yeah.
yeah, it was almost essential. But I think the story and this is a level that I think really implements the combat in a way that I really liked. If I remember correctly, there wasn't too much customizing or like item distribution during this chapter. I don't remember doing that too much.
Nothing deep. No.
Yeah, but all of the characters had a decent amount of moves, especially when you're playing a Shifu. Like, you have every move at your disposal.
Yep.
And that was really cool, like, to just play as somebody that's like maxed out. So that's probably why you didn't need to customize items too much and do all that.
Yeah.
But do you have any final thoughts on Imperial China before we move on?
No, not really. Like, I think we talked it to death. It is one of the better stories in the
Yeah,
entire game.
totally. So now we can move on to Twilight of Edo, Japan, the Infiltrator. In feudal Japan, a mysterious figure named Ode Io is trying to throw Japan into chaos. The Enma ninja clan sends one of their ninja named Aboromaru to rescue a prisoner who can stabilize Japan, then kill Ode Io. After being rescued, the prisoner joins Aboromaru in the battle with Ode Io. After Ode-io is slain, the prisoner reveals that he is Ryoma Sakamoto. Aboromaru is then given the choice of returning to the Enma or joining Ryoma in his plans to rebuild Japan. And it wasn't in the description, but I want to throw in that there's a battle with Miyamoto Musashi, who's like the greatest swordsman who's ever lived, is a real person. And
Really?
oh, yes. He has one of my favorite sayings of all time. It's if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. And it's like if you take the time to master one craft, that discipline that you learn to acquire that mastery, you will see it in every other endeavor that you try to take on. So, like,
I
if
didn't know that. That's awesome, actually. Wait,
it's
wasn't
so
that
good.
it's like whenever you turn. It's like whenever you go upstairs and you turn the corner, and then there's like this one guy that just comes out and like kills all four people around him. Is that the guy that you're talking about?
No, it's when you run in on Ode Io before the fight on the roof, and he summons that ghost from the dead.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, you have this battle with the greatest swordsman who ever lived, and you beat him, and
I thought
then
it was just a fabric. I thought it was just a fabricated enemy. I'm like, wow. Okay.
yeah, no,
Pretty cool.
it was so cool. The level perspective, like playing through the level, it wasn't necessarily my favorite, but it's up there. Like, it's probably top 3, but and mostly because Miyamoto Musashi being in it just raised the
Yeah.
bar so much. He has a book that is really, really cool where it's just like all of his teachings. I know we're getting into the weeds here, but he was a swordsman that really communicated the importance of like not just practicing swordsmanship, like learning art and painting and other things, because it helps you master all of your other crafts. It's that if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything, or see it in all things. And it was really cool. I just thought that was like a nice touch, and it wasn't in the description, so I wanted to make sure it was mentioned.
It's a nice little detail. I completely missed that, actually.
Well, hey, now that you know it, it'll give you that little extra bit of appreciation for it.
Right?
it makes me wonder how much of that stuff was sprinkled throughout the more historical stuff that didn't go into the future,
Yeah.
that we just don't know, because, similar to, I just happen to know who that person was. But what did you think of Twilight of Edo Japan?
I thought it was a very good chapter. I thought, like, it was the first one that I played, so it was a nice introduction. And I don't know, it's just the way, like, the whole, like, honor and the fact, like, I don't know what was the point of the whole, what was it, how many lives they taken. Like, every time that you complete a combat encounters, it was, like, lives taken, 26 or something like that. I don't know what the
Yeah.
point of that specifically was, but I like that was just, like, kind of like a touch, like, he remembers that he's having to take lives to do his objective. But there's a few great mechanics in this entire thing. One especially was the fact that you can basically turn invisible. You're kind of like stationary towards it, but it throws the enemies for a loop, and they're able to like pass through you. So it might be possible to do all of Edo Japan without killing a single person. I haven't tried it, and I probably won't. But
It would be really hard.
yeah, but I mean, the shuriken attack's pretty overpowered. But regardless, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that move was, was incredible.
Yeah.
And during one of these sections, there was like these little gears that you could basically like kind of like go across and like that. And the way that they implemented that puzzle mechanic was really nice.
Yeah.
But aside from the secret samurai, the overall messaging of it was kind of like I don't really know where to place my finger on it, but there is a lot of stuff that was kind of hidden. Like whenever I was looking at the credits for the game for that chapter specifically, there was like certain encounters or areas that I didn't actually experience going through the entire thing, because the entire fortress is like it's like a maze all on its own.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of places to go, things to see, and people to meet. But I was more or less just going for the critical path. So I would love to replay it and see what I missed, but I can't get over that one shot where you're just going along the rooftops and just watching everything expand before you. Like, that was just a nice touch visually.
Yeah. I think visually this is maybe my favorite level. Just lots of really rich color, and I think the reason I probably don't say that it's my favorite is because navigating it got a little frustrating to me. There were a lot of times I would fall through a trap. And I think that like some of the trickery that was happening was really cool. But like I unlocked that that marionette that would follow me around and be a third party member, and then I fell through a trap and it got destroyed. And
I never got the marionette, so like that's new to me actually. So you got a different experience from what I did, because you probably explored a little bit more. And I guess like what we were saying with the like the whole like point of no returns, like there's this one moment whenever you're meeting with the guy that just has like a mechanical body, and he's trying to trick you into sitting down, and you can, and you can get stuck in like a jail cell and then go right back up, and you'll try to do the whole thing again. Like, I just really, and if you're not leveled up enough, you can struggle with that combat encounter. So again, like another instance where it's like, just warn me a little bit, please. Like, obviously after the first time around, that was, you understand, like, take your time a little bit more. But overall, it was a great chapter. The final boss fight, though, I thought was really easy, actually.
Yeah.
I thought it was just really disappointing. Like, the one person that had like the mechanical body, like he had all those like little drones or whatever they were, and then the actual person himself being a little challenging, but the boss at the very end was just too easy, in my opinion.
I wonder if that is because we probably frivolously killed a lot of people and leveled Aboromaru quite a bit, whereas I think, because I too felt like, I was like, what is the point of of them counting how many lives you're taking? And I think that the challenge is to get through it without killing as many people as possible, and then when you get to the final boss, then it would be really challenging.
Okay.
because you're not leveling. But if you are just kind of going through killing 30 plus people, leveling up, and you get to them, then yeah, of course you're a trained killer at this point. You know, you already were, but now you're even a better one. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, it kind of results in you just kind of decimating that final boss, which was a great sprite though, like
Oh yeah.
the big
Very,
like
very awesome design. Like
frog.
the entire game has just like awesome character design. Some of them are a little bit, I wouldn't say grotesque, but a little bit on the unpleasant looking side. But on the not like from a not from like, oh, how they created it just looks bad or something like that. It's just like the art direction for some of those enemies are kind of like gross in my opinion. But overall, like everything in this game just looks stunning.
Yeah,
Like enemies and all.
yeah, agreed. There was that weird section in the middle where you kind of go, I don't know if it was like a weird like underworld area where there is this like like a spiritual being that I had to fight, and I had to like take out all of these like weird spectral ghosts before fighting him to be able to beat him, if I
I
remember correctly.
I don't remember that. No.
Yeah, and
Was that part of Edo Japan or a different chapter?
I believe it was Edo Japan. Yeah, if I remember
That,
correctly. But
I think that might have been what I was talking about in like the end credits. Like there's like one moment where it's like kind of like underground looking ish, and then there's like some person like blocking the doorway or something like that. I never got
yeah,
to experience that. So there's a lot
yeah,
of hidden stuff, a lot of trickery, and it creates a chapter that I think if somebody were to play it, just that before everything else, it kind of sets a very high bar for all the other stories because of
yeah,
how well everything was executed in that story.
yeah. Before we go too much further, do you happen to know what your runtime was for the game?
20 hours
20
altogether.
hours. Okay. Yeah, I was
Like 20 hours,
25.
30 minutes or something. Okay.
So,
Well, I know that you went through and did like the something near the end, like a lot of those. So
yeah,
yeah,
I really went for it there at the end. But
I had to. So
but yeah, Twilight of Edo Japan, definitely one of the best. And yeah, there I think there is a lot that like you were saying is maybe if you don't really explore and dig into it, you might miss out. So it might be worth going back and replaying and really trying to, like, if you see a grayed out room on the map, just pop in and see what's going on, because I know that's what I was doing. If I saw a room that I could go into that I hadn't been in, I just popped my head in and was like, is there anything in here that I need, or whatever, and just kind of took my time with it a little bit. But yeah, I think Edo Japan's a good one. You want to move on to the Wild West?
sure, go
Okay,
ahead. I actually
cool.
like that one.
So, The Wild West, or The Wanderer, this chapter takes place in the American Old West. An outlaw called the Sundown Kid and his rival, a bounty hunter named Mad Dog, arrive in Success Town, a place terrorized by a group of bandits called the Crazy Bunch, led by Dio, the last remaining survivor of the 7th Cavalry Division. Sundown stands up to the bandits, and they decide to razz the town in retaliation. Mad Dog agrees to help Sundown and the townsfolk prepare the town's defenses. After the town emerges from the battle victorious, Mad Dog challenges Sundown to one final duel. The player has the option of killing Mad Dog or running away. The Wild West might be one of my favorite adventure levels of the adventure driven levels of all of them, because at first I didn't realize what was happening, and I made like a crucial error, and the boss was way too difficult. And so I went back and did it all over again. And I realized how the systems were working. And
Okay.
it gave me like a new appreciation for it. And I really enjoyed figuring that out. Like, so before I get into it, what was your experience with the Wild West, and what do you think?
I definitely thought it was one of the more interesting ones. Like obviously, a lot of people really love like the Western style for anything really. So whenever I went into it, it was a very, very brutal and uh, sometimes like they were using like very strong language, and I actually liked how they were able to capture that era and how people acted. Um, I think my least favorite thing was the fact that you had to go around and lay traps for the final encounter. Well, the only actual encounter in that entire thing. But it did lead to some interesting things, like people creating bombs or somebody hanging like a picture of somebody's favorite. I think it was like dancer or singer, and then like whenever some guy is like crawling along, like basically almost dead, is like, why would somebody put that there? Like I don't know why that was just hilarious to me.
It was really good. Yeah.
And that was also another instance where, well, obviously they couldn't, but like the point of no return, because they kind of tell you like after the eight bells, like you're basically having to fight at sunup. But the combat encounter, but um the actual encounter itself was actually very interesting. I loved how they had the multiple types of enemies that honestly took me about 3 or 4 tries to actually do, because some of them were performing actions I didn't know how to properly counter, and some of the moves I didn't understand were kind of like better, like Mad Dogs. I think it was like a piercing shot or something like that. Oh, I think that was for the Sundown Kid. Sundown Kid making like a piercing shot that could hit like 4 different enemies at once, and that was very useful. And Mad Dog's like shocking ability, I don't remember what that's called specifically, but it was very useful for the for Odio himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but overall, I would say it was kind of like more of the more adventure, one of the more interesting adventures for it. I just feel like it's a little bit on the shorter side, sadly.
Yeah. What's tough about it is, I think it's very easy to not understand what's happening, which happened to me the first time. And,
Yeah.
The level sets up where, this you're going to have to fight this guy. They're going to come at sun up. And so you have to make all these preparations, and you have 8 hours, quote unquote, to do it, which is you have basically an hour translates to a minute, and you have 8 minutes and at the each minute's passing, there's a bell, and you have to strategically make your way throughout the town and all the different houses and find the equipment to set traps. But what I didn't realize at first, I ran around and gathered all the materials and then set everybody out to place the traps, where after I did it, when I was setting the traps, I realized some people were returning before others. And I realized that not everybody set traps as quickly. So I would go round up the character specific traps, have them start placing those, and then take all the other traps and go to the people that were returning the quickest and have them place traps. Okay. And then by the time they would get done, I would be setting the people that had character specific traps to place. I would send them back out, and then the other people that I gave the first set of traps or the second set of traps that I realized were quicker, they would be coming back, and I would send them back out, because some people would take 3 minutes to place a trap, and by the time I got back, by the time I had all of the equipment to set the traps, there wouldn't even be enough time for them to go out and place anything. But one guy could place a trap in 30 seconds. And so I was like, oh, just keep having him run out and set these traps. And basically the final attempt, I had every trap placed. And because the first time I maybe took out 3 of Odio's henchmen, and I was just getting rinsed by the boss. But then when I finally figured it out, everybody got taken out. Every trap went off without a hitch, and all I had to fight was Odio. And then I just wrecked him first try after I figured it out. And
okay, see, you learned and you had an easier time with it. I did it. I had I think 3 horse riders, 5 different enemies, and then Odio. But luckily, if you're saving Odio for last, he won't actually attack until everybody's dead, or until you hit him with something. So I had to make sure if I was using Sundown Kid's uh, piercing bullet, I had to make sure that it was in an angle that didn't hit Odio specifically. Otherwise, he would
Ah,
actually start attacking.
okay.
So that was a nice little touch. I just didn't know that there was somebody that could actually lay traps the fastest. I more or less just did like a blanket um, thing, and then um, once the final encounter came and I had to redo it, I just thought like, okay, maybe I just gotta think through what I'm gonna do for the combat encounter, because luckily the combat system, it doesn't there's not like a there's not like an SP system like Octopath Traveler, or like a action point system like in Triangle Strategy, so you can use any ability you want whenever your turn's up, basically. So
Yeah.
luckily, I just had to be like, okay, I got to do this turn, and then just keep doing like the best attacks, not rely on some of the more mediocre ones. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's you honestly, you kind of getting through it that way. I wonder, like, when you finally beat it, how rewarding did it feel?
it felt very rewarding, actually.
Okay.
So was it kind of like the opposite for you?
Well, I would say what was more rewarding was actually just figuring out how that level functioned. Like,
Okay, makes sense.
because it didn't necessarily click until I started thinking, like, I was like, okay, this level's very adventure driven with the, setting the traps and rounding up the right stuff. And so I started thinking back to what everybody was saying, and there were some people that just seemed more competent. And so I was like, you know what, the sheriff has like lived here his whole life. He probably knows all the best places. I'm going to send him. And I think he was the one that would like come back in like 30 seconds. And then the woman in town, she would like come back in like a minute. And the kid, the really spry kid, he would take forever. So I would like have him place the one that I think it was the shovel. There was something that he had that he specifically was the only one that could place it. And
Okay, I think I was talking about. I
yeah,
think it was
so,
like the manure trap or something.
yeah, I think it was yeah, it may have been that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it was these like just figuring that stuff out felt really rewarding. And then yeah, beating Odio felt like, of course I'm gonna beat him because I wiped out everybody else and we are basically
Yeah.
ganging up on him. But watching everybody ride into town and get taken out, like that all felt really rewarding. And to an extent, that is a part of the boss fight. It's like the preface for the boss fight. And so figuring that out felt more rewarding than actually beating Odio.
Right.
But yeah, the
But I do
Wild
have a
West.
question.
Yeah.
Well, no. Just getting back to the thing, like you said that you could basically ride away as the Sundown Kid. Did you actually run away from the Mad Dog encounter, or did you fight Mad Dog at the end? Because that's what I did. I did
Yeah.
want them to settle their score like men, because
Yeah.
it's kind of like a long time coming, and they had to do it. Just
Yeah.
felt like part of the story. So you did the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I put him down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Sad, but hey.
the only, I think if I felt like neither one of them actually wanted it to happen, then I think I would have refrained. But it felt like both of them wanted that. And
Yeah.
so I don't feel bad for having had done that. But
I mean, Mad Dog really asked for it, so he got
yeah.
what he wanted.
Yeah. And what a great character the Sundown Kid is. Like, man
Yeah,
of few words, but
very stoic, very serious, and
yeah.
I swear that one exchange at the bar was freaking hilarious. Whenever
Yeah.
the T word, I'll go with that one on.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
So good. Well, do you have any final thoughts on the Wild West before we move on?
Not really. I just hated how short it was. Actually, I thought
Yeah.
it would have been fun to at least have like a couple of more encounters, or maybe have like while you're waiting for everybody, like be able to go to the barn and like test some abilities at like some bales of hay or crates or something like that. The way you can understand some of the abilities that you had, like the piercing bullet or the shocking thing that Mad Dog had. I would have loved to at least practice that before going into it for the first time, because I probably could have thought quickly on my feet and beat it on the first encounter. But that's just part of the process, though.
Yeah. Cool. Well, to piggyback off of the shortest, like feeling like the level was too short, we can move on to present day, the strongest, which I think I beat it in like 30 minutes. To me, this was the shortest of everything. But the strongest is set in the present day. Masaru Takahara strives to become the strongest fighter in the world by fighting the masters of different fighting disciplines to learn their techniques. However, another fighter, Odie Obright, has the same idea but deliberately kills each of his opponents during the fight. He then challenges Masaru, but Masaru defeats him. This is, I think, the most combat-focused level, and while it is the shortest, I think it was really cool in how it challenged you to have to lure enemies into showcasing different moves. And I thought it was a lot of fun to be like, okay, what do I have to do to lure these enemies into using their attacks so that I can learn all the techniques? And I managed to get through it with every technique learned. But what did you think about the present day?
I thought it was overall like one of the cooler chapters. Like the whole entire presentation, the fact that it kind of felt like it was kind of like a fighting game. Like they had like every single character like in a row, and it was kind of like, choose who you want to fight, and everyone like that was kind of cool. Yeah. I did like that aspect of having to get hit by an enemy to learn their attack and then turn it back on them. Some of them, each enemy had their own unique battle difficulty. Like what was it? He was basically nearly unhittable. So whenever I was trying to hit him, I had to use an attack that had like the highest damage possible. So the few attacks that I did land on him, I was able to knock him out completely. I love that touch. Mm-hmm. I did like what was it? It was the moment where we were kind of like looking at the river and like the way that the game frames like the whole like the sunset and mm-hmm. like it just looked like a very awesome scene. And after defeating the final boss, the way that they have the message conveyed that whenever you're at the top, everybody is going to challenge you. I liked that as a message.
Yeah.
And it kind of came, and it wasn't just like, you're going to say that and then it cuts to the end or something like that. No, it's like he says that, and then before it cuts to the end, somebody's like, hey, I know you, I want to take you down or something like that. So it kind of came true. I like that.
Yeah. You can't be the best forever. Yeah. Someone's going to come along and someone's going to want to challenge you to prove themselves. And that was really cool. It really did feel, it had like some like light Street Fighter 2 vibes where like you would pick your fighter and they had like their description and where they're from. And then after you beat them, they would show up and they would have their beaten up face and they would say something to you before you moved on to the next character. And it had almost like a Mega Man vibe of like, I felt like if you beat certain certain fighters and learned their abilities and then went and fought somebody else, you could use those abilities to kind of gamify it. Even though I just blitzed through and from left to right.
Same. But like I did notice that, and some of the fights were more unique. Like I think it was like the one wherever you're like in like a wrestling ring. I didn't have this happen in my playthrough, but I saw a clip of before the boss in that wrestling ring. Somebody threw like a can at him, saying like, you suck or something like that. And the guy like literally turned around and like jumped into the stand, and like all you saw was like the clouds of him like beating the guy up, and then jumped back into the ring. So it's like I didn't have that happen in my gameplay. Well, in my playthrough, but I really would have loved to have seen that because that was just hilarious. I didn't know that could actually happen. So if I knew that, I would have not tried to defeat everybody so quickly. I would have loved to see like the little touches that they had for each one of their stages.
I wonder if that happens if you lose. Because I didn't lose to him.
No, what was it? It was the Mexican fighter, I believe. Like somebody just throws like a can at him, and then he like jumps into the stage, beats up the guy, jumps out of the stage, beats up the guy that did it, and then jumps back into the stage. Like I did see it on Twitter, so it's a real thing. It's not like I'm making this up. So I'll probably send it to you after the show. It's a really nice touch.
Yeah, it's like one of those like recess rumors of like, if you if you go to this spot and you hit it 1,000 times, you'll get the Master Sword early. You know, it's not one of those like recess made up rumors.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, it is one of the shorter, but it was interesting. I enjoyed the combat focus. And, you know, in terms of like present day, I think it's easier to go for like what is the modern day like equivalent of like a fighter, you know, and like taking like a martial artist and like a mixed martial artist and acquiring all these new abilities. Because in like 1994 the UFC would have formed and mixed martial arts would have started to grow, so people may have been like expressing an interest in that, and they would have incorporated that into the game at around that time. So that's really cool. So yeah, I just, you know, being somebody that enjoys mixed martial arts and UFC, that kind of stood out to me. But yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on the present day before we move on?
Not really. Like the same. Like was just like, yeah, I hate that it was that short, but I understand like they didn't want to drag it out too much, and
Yeah.
I just hate how every boss has like that one very sweeping, high damaging attack that if you don't have at least 75% of your health, you're not going to be able to survive the attack. I hate how spontaneous that is, but
Yeah.
it's just part of the process. You learn and then you beat them, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, we can move on to the near future, also called The Outsider. In the near future, in Japan, a biker gang called the Crusaders has been kidnapping people with unknown intentions. A young orphan with psychic powers named Akira Todokaro grows up in an orphanage with his sister. One day, the Crusaders kidnap one of the children from the orphanage, so Akira and his friend Lawless set out to rescue him. Akira learns the location of the Crusaders' base and discovers a plot by the Japanese government to liquefy people and use them to power a giant idol named Odeo. Lawless then sacrifices himself to power an ancient mech called the Steel Titan, which Akira uses to destroy Odeo. What did you think about the near future?
This was the coolest chapter.
It was same. I would give you a high five right now. Like
it is literally like the one chapter that I would actually want to replay for fun. Like like the way that they have like what is it, like whatever you're like in the overworld or whatever. It's like it's a little bit like Pokemon where you're like going to like if Pokemon was like you're able to like walk along like the lines between the routes or anything like that. That's kind of what it felt like to me. I love that the enemies were kind of roaming around. You could be like, okay, no, I'm not going to go this way. I'm going to go the other way, and then just try to avoid them. But you know, that kind of stuff. But a chapter that literally had you go into a giant mech after kind of setting it up, like having like that awesome old school anime or show kind of vibe where it has like talk about how cool the Titan is and how it's going to beat up everybody, and then you're in that mech and then you're beating up tanks, jets, and then that giant statue. Dude, I was smiling ear to ear during that final section of the chapter. It was just so awesome.
Yeah, and has one of the coolest shots ever, which you used as the featured image for your review, which was the mech looking through and his eye glaring. Oh, dude.
So cool. I had to make sure I timed that perfectly.
It's so good.
Loved it. But for the characterization though, Akira, even though he's basically even though he's the protagonist, he kind of feels he's definitely exploiting some of the people in the orphanage. Like what was it? One of the kids he was having to be like, no, I need somebody's money. Go get it for me or something like that.
Yeah, what was that? Watanabe?
Watanabe. Like he wasn't. So Akira wasn't a pure protagonist, but I just loved the way that he was styled, how he had his own attitude, how the entire world felt like it had its own style to it. I wasn't a fan of the overall ending. Like right after he beat Odeo, it kind of just transitions to like a dream sequence, like he just wakes up on a bench or something. I don't know what that was about. Did you get that ending? Or
yeah, the way I interpreted that is that he just went back to living his life.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Or maybe he's
it,
just like remembering that entire scenario while he's streaming or something.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because I never interpreted it as him waking up from a dream. Like,
Yeah,
I thought like, you know, it was just like a couple days later, because later he gets on the motorcycle and rides off, which is
true.
Lawless's motorcycle. So I think I don't think it was a dream sequence exactly, but one thing about that I never realized I could do was go to the stand and sell food for health stuff, like, or for like healing items.
Seriously? Oh, that's
Yes.
cool. I
Yeah.
didn't notice.
Yeah.
You did more investigation, but that's why you're called the detective. So.
Well, I realized that I really needed to craft items with the old man at the antique shop, the engineer, the robotics engineer, with like really unorthodox methods of
Go hit this tambourine over there and then wash your hands. Like, what the heck?
yes. It was so weird and like really charming, and I loved the characters the most in this one. Fast forward to the end when we get to pick a character for the final chapter. I picked Akira.
Yep, me too.
He
Well, actually, I did pick the shinobi, but I went and found Akira. I made sure that he was in my party because he did have the best healing abilities too. So I wanted to make sure I had that for my party during that segment.
Yeah. In terms of attacks, I don't know if he was the best for that, but he just throughout this whole chapter, like between like I remember when I first got into the overworld and I was just running around to all the different areas and exploring, and like I went to the bar and they were like, "What are you doing here? Get out of here, you punk kid!" Like, and like leaving and like reading people's thoughts, and all they're thinking about is that Matango, and like I really liked that. Like when you're at the orphanage, I remember reading a kid's thoughts that was sitting in front of the TV, and the thoughts were like, I wish Akira would stop reading my thoughts.
Yeah.
And
I noticed it too. Like I think he was reading like his sister's thoughts, and it was like, no, I'm not gonna think about it. I'm not gonna let you know what's in my thoughts right now. I'm like, okay, that's a nice little touch actually. I like that.
yeah,
Kind of like self-aware, but doesn't be like, oh, see how stupid mind reading is. Like, no, it's just
yeah, so cool. And then like uncovering the truth, like of like going to the research facility and kind of getting into that back area where you're really not supposed to be, and finding out that when you fight, I think it's like W1, that's Watanabe's father.
Yep, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
And one of the secrets that I really love that they were at least able to touch on, because usually they would just use the whole like, oh, his father died, that's why he's more of a tragic character. Like they at least went into what happened in that entire story, like how Wallace was kind of the one that did it, and that's why he wanted to sacrifice himself, but Akira had to step up to be the hero. I actually thought that was like a very strong moment in the overall game itself.
Yeah.
So it was overall like this. So like the near future is actually basically my favorite. Like I love the entire like how point A to point B was, how it had the strong emotional moments, like the fact that Akira was kind of just rude at times, had his own attitude, but was at least somebody that wanted to do good and then did, and then was able to tackle challenging emotional themes as well. So I really loved what they did with the entirety of the near future.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is. I go back and forth with near future and the distant future, which we'll get to in just a moment. But, the way everything builds up when you finally get to power the Titan and you're like doing that like double blast.
Yep.
That all feels really cool. And I like when they liquefy the turtle's like consciousness and put him into that robot that goes with you and is your partner throughout the experience. And using the robotic enhancements to make him better.
Yep.
All that's like, I felt like the distant future is maybe, or sorry, the near future is maybe the one I could see expanded into a full game that
Oh, yeah.
I would love to play. But outside of that,
I do want to see, like, for something like the near future and distant future, what the actual years those were taken in, just to see how far away we are from something like that, or if we're
yeah,
already past that. Because I think, what was it? Somebody mentioned, like, one of the years was like the time that Back to the Future took place, and then it's like now we still don't have hoverboards and people aren't wearing like weird clothing or anything like that. I want to see
yeah,
I want to see what how far away that was back in the 90s. You know?
yeah. I think the near future is supposed to be like 2024, if I remember
Okay.
correctly. Let's see. Live Alive, the near future. I'm going to see if I can find that out really quick.
So I'm not sure if they mentioned it or if I'm just completely forgetting.
Yeah, I don't think they outright say it anywhere, but for some reason I feel like it was alluded to in something I had read, but I could just be making that up. I don't know. Cuz like, in 1994, 20 years into the future is a pretty big leap, and they may have thought that, but I don't know if that's fact or not. I don't remember where I read that, and I didn't just find it when I Googled it, so who knows? I could have
Yeah.
dreamt it. Who knows? But we can move on to the distant future, also known as the mechanical heart. In the distant future, a spaceship called Cogito Ergo Sum is returning to Earth carrying a dangerous alien called the Behemoth. The mechanic, Kato, creates a spherical robot and gives him the ironic name Cube. The player takes the role of Cube as it explores the ship and meets the crew. However, things begin to go wrong as the ship malfunctions and a crew member named Kirk dies in a freak accident. Soon, the Behemoth is released and it kills more crew members. The remaining crew members continue to blame and mistrust one another, continuing with the deaths of the crew members Huey and Rachel. However, it is finally revealed that the culprit is the ship's computer, OD-10. Cube hacks into the computer and defeats it. What did you think about the distant future? Because it has like The Thing vibes and like Alien vibes, and I really loved that.
I did love the whole era of mystery. Like, whenever Kirk died, like, I was actually kind of torn up about it because they kind of give you a whole. Like, I think during like the entirety of in the demo segment, like it more or less left off with Kirk and them having like a problem out in space, and then after you pick right up, so I was actually very anxious to get back and see what it was about, and I loved everything that they did to it. Obviously, some of the stuff was a little, I want to say, trite to a degree, like her taking the body and just thinking the guy's sleeping or something like that. Like, I kind of thought, obviously that's like a coping mechanism with grief, but at the same time, it was kind of like a little sudden and just kind of a little too sudden, in my opinion. But overall, like, I really loved how they handled, like I said, like the air mystery. They had some of the horror vibes. Like, there were some sequences where you're actually getting chased by the behemoth, and you actually had to make sure that you had like the I think it was like the what was it, like the crowbar or something like that. I don't remember what they called it.
Yeah, it was the like mechanical crowbar.
Mechanical crowbar. Like, you had to make sure that that was charged whenever you were going out, to make sure that you could, pry open any door if it closed, to make sure you didn't get eaten by the behemoth. I personally would have loved to at least been able to have the opportunity to fight the behemoth at least once with what was the commander's name? I completely forgot.
Oh, holy smokes. That's gonna
a lot,
bug me.
a lot of the characters' names, like, they're a little like they're memorable characters, but the names
Yeah.
aren't memorable.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I only remembered Kirk because you said it, and I only remember Cube because you play as Cube. So
Yeah, and that was like a really cool. I thought that was a cool name. Let's see. Does it say anywhere what that dude's name is? I remember it's like Morgan or something like that. But I could just be thinking. Oh, Corporal
like
Darth.
Darth. Okay.
Yeah.
So I really would love to at least have like a sequence where you could at least like fight the behemoth with Darth, and then like once it like hurts Cube to a degree or something like that, they would have said like, Cube, get out of here. I'll take its attention, like shoot it, and then like that would have been cool because he does survive at the very end, and I did love that. I love that he survived because after that, like there's this running sequence where it's like Cube trying to give him like a cup of coffee, and he keeps getting kicked away by Darth. So I love that they were at least able to, mend the trust between like the machine and Darth because he was very untrustworthy of machines while the researcher wasn't. So
that hurt my feelings when I tried to give him a cup of coffee and he kicked me.
First time around, yes, it did. But then after he explained that he was kind of like robo-racist, I was like, okay, I understand. We'll try to fix things.
Yeah, you fought these in the war. They killed a lot of your friends. I get it.
That's kind of understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. But I really liked that was a highlighting moment of kind of the message of this game of like forgiveness and love, because, we haven't gotten to the exact ending yet, but that is kind of the connective tissue there's hate that is like this timeless thing that is always going to be fueled in one way or another. And the way to combat it is to forgive and show love. And, I think that, I never expected this game to go there. And,
like I said, like I think I even messaged you on Discord about this. Like, I mean, I really think a lot of the problems in some of these stories could have just been resolved with a conversation or something. Like let's just sit down and talk for like 5 minutes, and then everything's over. But that's not as theatrical.
Yeah. But I think that the distant future really does hammer some of the adventure elements home. Like you said earlier, there's like one fight in it, and I thought that was really cool. I never usually I'm really good at being able to tell what's happening. The whole time I thought it was like the commander of the ship. I never thought that the ship itself was the villain. And so it
had a Space Odyssey vibe to it, like how the machine, like how the AI was just going to take over, and I could see that, like I really can, and I love the fact that you actually have to hide for the majority of the time. Like there's the whole, like after they get rid of like the elevator, like you couldn't use it anymore. You had to use the ducts and going through all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of like, it was a very nice touch.
Yeah. The distant future is, potentially my favorite. I go back and forth between that and the near future. But yeah, with that, you want to move on to the Middle Ages?
Of course, let's go.
Okay. I remember
we went to the end. So
yeah. I remember when you messaged me, because it's funny because on the back of the box it shows the Middle Ages, but I never looked at the back of the box. So I thought when I beat the distant future that was going to be the game over, and I was honestly at that point satisfied. It would have affected, like if I was reviewing it, I would have been like, yeah, it's cool that I would have chalked it up to being like just an old game, like they were just telling different stories and that was it. But the fact that it goes even deeper and there's a secret level and then there's a secret level after that connects everything,
I'm like, oh wait, there's more.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah. So all of that is really predicated on the Middle Ages. So we'll do that. It's called The Middle Ages, The Lord of Dark. This is a longer plot thing. So if at any point you have anything that you want to throw in to be like, oh, that was really cool, I like that, or something, feel free to interrupt me. It's okay.
I will. The Middle Ages and the near future are the two things that are kind of wrestling for my favorite place right now.
Okay, cool. So after completing the first 7 chapters, the medieval chapter is unlocked. A brave knight named Orsted, a hero beloved by the people, defeats his best friend, the wizard Strabo, in the final round of a fighting tournament, winning the right to marry Princess Althea of Lucrece, or Lucrece, not sure.
I think it's
Lucrece? Okay, we'll go with Lucrece. That night, she is kidnapped by the Demon King. The next day, Orsted and Strabo set out to rescue her. First, they find the heroes who defeated the Demon King 30 years prior, the knight Hash and the priest Uranus, or Uranus if you're feeling froggy, and convince them to join. They fight and defeat the Demon King, but Hash dies due to the plague. Althea is nowhere to be found, and Strabo is seemingly killed by falling rocks. Orsted and Uranus return to Lucrece in defeat. That night, Orsted is tricked into slaying the king of Lucrece by an apparition of the Demon King. He is accused of being the Demon King himself and is imprisoned. Uranus helps him escape but is killed. Orsted returns to the mountain of the Demon King and finds Strabo alive, having faked his own death. Strabo reveals that, out of jealousy for Orsted, he sold his soul to become the next Demon King, and tricked Orsted into killing the king. Orsted is forced to kill him. He then rescues Althea, but she confesses her love for Strabo, believing he had saved her where Orsted abandoned her. She then kills herself out of despair. Very Shakespearean. Orsted, in his grief, snaps and sacrifices his soul to become the next Demon King and names himself Odio. He then takes revenge on all Lucrece, killing everyone. What were your thoughts?
There's the name drop, Odio.
Yes.
Odio in every single story. I loved that they kept, that there was at least something that made sense for every one of these chapters, that there was this apparition, this dark lord that basically kept infesting these specific individuals to be just hateful people that wanted to cause harm to others. But for the I'm sorry I cut you off like that. I apologize.
Hey, no, you're okay.
Like the Middle Ages, I want to say is kind of it kind of gave me that familiarity because I had actually over the holidays last year I had actually played Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 on the Switch. So I kind of whenever I was playing through the Middle Ages here, like obviously it's not like a 1-to-1 kind of thing, but having that medieval ages, knight mage and princess being held by a dark lord, that kind of got my Dragon Quest love into it. So it kept me really engaged, and I love where they went with it. There was the entire level itself was very diverse with all of the different environments. Like you had the entire you had the village, the kingdom around that village, and then the village off to the side, the Dark Lord's dungeon, and the Snowy Mountains. And I love how you had to go to each one specifically for certain narrative reasons. This is the first time I ever actually thought that the customization wasn't actually shallow at all. I loved how I noticed that if you put a second weapon into Orsted's, I think it's like the shield slot or whatever, it actually increases how fast he attacks. Obviously, it doesn't create like a second attack. I experimented with that. I didn't find it to be useful over getting the extra defense, so after experimenting, I kind of just went and used a shield. I wouldn't recommend it. I love that. What was it? For the entire story, I loved that after you seemed like you defeated the Dark King, they had a really good facade going. I didn't think that Strabo was that he actually willingly trapped himself to save the princess. I literally thought that he actually did die. So whenever Orsted went back to the castle with the grave news that he wasn't able to find the princess and some of his followers died in the process, I actually thought that that's actually how the story was going to go, and then led into the final chapter, because I kind of knew that there was that final chapter to it always. What was it, Lord Macho from Lords of Game? Like he knows about the entire game, so he kind of ruined that aspect to it. He didn't tell me what all it was, but moving on though. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of rambly.
Hey, no, you're okay. Clearly, this was your favorite.
Oh yeah, God, I loved it, and the fact they used the same exact thing for the final level too. Whenever and after the grave news is shared and the king's like in that despair, whenever you wake up in the middle of the night thinking that the Lord of Dark has risen again and is after you, it's actually just a visage that's taken over the king and you slay him. I thought that was an excellent twist.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I noticed that Orsted never actually talked until the very end, wherever he um, embraced becoming this new Dark Lord. So obviously, what the Dark Lord does is get into somebody, break them down to the point of being possessed, and then accept it. Like I actually
Hmm.
loved how they set all that up. It was awesome. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, totally. The like the Demon King, or like, the Dark Lord, is the I think the closest representation we get to the through line of hate and the agent of like hate and chaos and like the evil of the world, that persists, and seeing it corrupt Orsted was like done so well that, by the, I didn't see, I there was one time I thought, wait, like nobody's really grieving Strabo. Like, we're really focusing on Hash. And
Yeah.
then like it was like right after I had that thought, I returned and found Strabo and was like, of course, dude. Of course this fool loved Althea. And now, like when they were recapping like everything that had happened, and that he like always loved Althea, but he was never strong enough to beat Orsted, and was really trying, and like having that moment of like, you're just so competitive. Like, I really loved her. You wouldn't just let me have this. And there was that 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 jealousy brewing inside him that made him vulnerable to the Dark Lord, but still couldn't beat Orsted. And
Yeah,
but
I actually thought that Stribo would actually have become like a second Dark Lord for that entire chapter. Like once it took over Orsted, like okay, it's like okay, yeah, that makes more sense. But I thought at one point, like Stribo would have come out and said like it was, after you had abandoned me in that tunnel, I found my lord and he gave me the power to take you down or something like that. I
yeah,
thought something like that was going to happen. And whenever they completely subverted my expectations, it shocked me. And I really loved how that story went.
yeah, that is something where I wonder, because you, before you go into the final chapter, you can pick Orsted, and there's a completely different final chapter if you pick Orsted as the character that you go into it with. And that's why,
Really?
yeah, that's why he's glowing red when everyone else is glowing blue. And I didn't pick Orsted because I was like, I didn't think like, oh, maybe this will be like a redemption arc for him. I was like, no, he became bad. I don't want to play as him. Like, I don't want to pick him before I knew what I was getting into. And so I think there is an opportunity to revisit the final chapter. I didn't have the time to do it before we sat down to do this. I do have something that I can read about it if we want to when we get to the final chapter, but there is that option, and I think that may give you the closure in that regard. Like, you may just want to, like, next time you're like, you know what, I need to kill a couple of hours, maybe fire up the final chapter
I might
again.
do it tonight actually because I didn't know. Because the only reason I didn't pick Orsted in the very beginning is because I really did love the Shinobi's movesets more.
Yeah.
I liked Orsted's kit, but I just found it a little it was a little lacking in my opinion. It just
Yeah.
didn't have like any real like ranged attacks to really take care of things. You always had to get up close and personal. So
Cool. Well, before we move on to the final chapter, do you have any last thoughts on the Middle Ages?
like I said, it's wrestling with near future for my heart as the favorite of this
Yeah.
entire like. Would you call it like an anthology JRPG? Because I know it's called like a simple JRPG, but it's kind of like it's more like an anthology with like an actual end goal to it. And I really loved how they handled each and every one of the stories. And the Middle Ages just felt like it felt really refreshing after experiencing like the near future and distant future. If I did it in your order, I mean, I think the near future was actually the last one that I did.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was kind of I was kind of like moving from the near future back to the Middle Ages. So it's kind of like going from like a retro to you know way back when. So I loved how much of a refreshing shift that was.
Yeah. That was cool because going from distant future back to the Middle Ages was pretty cool. The only thing I would want to end on is I really loved the moment with Uranus in the cell where he's basically warning Orsted about what is to come. And Hash did the same thing when he was dying, talking about, how people turn on you. You go from the hero to being the villain. And like you're trying to live up to these expectations and people start to forget about you or they sour on you. And it's up to you to rise above that and be better. And Uranus was warning Orsted of it right before he freed him. And right before Uranus died. And, I think that putting all of that in there right before you go and you're even reminded of it right before kind of like the final acts. And, but Orsted still, goes against that, likely because, his best friend and, his wife, they're both dead and he's kind of like already feeling alone and like alienated and, he's been put into exile and feels, all of this, like, despite everything he's given up and lost, everybody's turned his back on him and he's alone. And you have that, maybe this is exactly what happened to Hash, but Hash turned into a hermit. He like went and lived off on his own and just turned his back to everything. Whereas Orsted succumbed to the evil. But yeah, I just thought that was really cool, and never did I expect this game to go into that depth.
Yep.
But with that, we can move on to the final chapter. In the final chapter, Orsted summons the protagonists of the first 7 chapters to Lucrece, which is now colorless and depopulated, for a final battle. The player's chosen hero meets and recruits the other 6 heroes. The chapter is full of optional dungeons containing powerful equipment. Once ready, the group confronts Orsted, who questions the hero's motives and then transforms into a demon to fight them. Once defeated, he reverts to his human form and asks the hero to kill him. The hero gets a choice and can either kill him and get stuck in this time period forever, or spare him and leave his lair. The hero refuses, so Orsted attacks again, forcing each hero to fight the incarnation of Odio for their chapter. After the heroes win again, Orsted is unable to understand why he cannot win. The hero explains what he or she fights for to Orsted, each one having a different reason. He finally returns to reason, and so agrees to return them all to where they came from. He dies, and Lucrece is restored. Recruiting all heroes unlocks extra extended credits. Before we move on to our thoughts about it, do you want me to read what happens if you pick Orsted?
No, but I do want to make clear that I did not get everybody. I wasn't able to find everyone, and I did not actually do all of the trials. I only did the trials of the key.
Okay, yeah.
Because that was the only one I understood. Because I actually went and tried to do the Trial of Wisdom with Cube in my inventory, and it would not let me do it for some reason. So I don't know if I would just... I don't know. So I just kind of like gave up and was just like, you know what? Let me just do this other one, and then I'll just go and do it. Because I was kind of strapped for time wanting to get the review for Lords of Gaming out. So
yeah, I hear you.
I definitely should replay that soon.
Yeah, So the way that I understand it is, to complete a trial, you have to have that party member in your party. And so if you went to a trial and you didn't have that party member or that hero in your party, you wouldn't have been able to access it. And so it took me a while to realize that I could round up a party and then go swap someone out and replace party members and go and do all of the trials. But what I did was I rounded up my team, which was I picked Akira or Akira. Then I went and rounded up the Shifu. Obomaru. And at first I had picked Cube, and then I realized how hard it was. getting robotic enhancements to level him would have been a little annoying, even though I think he would have been a viable option. Like, spool up is a great move. The Mazer cannon was really good, but I ended up swapping him out for who did I swap him out for? I'm sorry. Oh, Pogo. Yes. Yeah, because
I recommended that.
yes, thank you. Yeah, that was the layup of the century. And then I went and I did the trials for each of them. And I, after that, went and fought. But what I noticed is that if you don't at some point put all of the party members or all the heroes in your party, even just for a moment, when you get to the end, you won't have to do their boss fight in the big rush mode. So I had to use Cube, even though he was like way under leveled for that last fight against the computer again, even though I didn't go the distance with him. So I didn't have to use the Sundown Kid and Masaru, the fighter. So it just bypassed their boss fights in rush mode, which makes me wish I had at least put them in there for a moment, or went and did the trials for everybody, ironed out my dream team, and then went and did the final fight. And I think I still had a really great experience, but I think that would have enhanced it just a little bit more.
Yeah. I wasn't actually aware of the boss rush mode. Like the way that it worked for me was I had went through when I leveled up. I got the Trials of the Key done, and then I went to what was it? The Door Before the Tomb, and I went and I had enough foresight to save at one point, just in case, because you can't escape it. And then I went and fought just ODO by himself. There actually wasn't like a boss rush mode. Like, did you have to interact with the statues in the room before, or?
So did you kill Orsted after you beat him when he says like strike me down?
I did, yes.
That's why you didn't have to fight them. You have the option of walking away and being like, I'm not going to kill you, which was the route I took, because I was like, if I kill him, then I'm not forgiving. Like, I'm not listening to all of the things that have been told to me this entire time. I need to forgive and show love.
I only struck him down, one, because I was frustrated by that final boss, and two, let's face it, it was a good final boss. I'll give it that much. But that second phase, oh my god, that was terrible.
Yeah.
And I only did it because Orsted was already, like, whenever you see a character descend that far down, it only makes sense that you would want to, put them out of their misery, because all they would do is wallow in that kind of stuff. So maybe I wasn't picking up what they were putting down before. So whenever I killed them, it more or less just gave me, a simple end credits. So I thought that maybe if I had to do the rest of the trials or do something different, like maybe forgive them, maybe there would have been a true ending or something like that. And it was like, you just proved it to me. So
yeah, well, yeah, you walk back into that room where all the statues are, and all of the heroes populate in front of the statues, and you get into like a boss rush mode where you have to beat each one, and it kind of recaps like what predicated those boss fights and reminds you of like why you fought them, and connects everything back to like reminds you like this is Odio represented in this time period, this is Odio in this time period. And
okay,
what I would like to do is go back to the final chapter, pick maybe Akira again, because to get into his trial you have to teleport out of missions, or you have to teleport out of random encounters a number of times, and one time you teleport out and you find yourself in his trial.
Okay, that actually happened to me. I thought it was the trial inside the mountain at one point.
Oh, okay.
Or I thought that's what it was, and I was kind of rushing, so I'm sounding very awful here to anybody that's probably listening past and completed it and took their time and probably yelling at me like, oh, look at this typical games journalist not doing the full content of a video game. But it was just like I was strapped for time at the time, so what I did was I reverted back to the save and just kind of refrained from using teleport. Like, it happened during the final trek in Archon's Roost, basically.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
did that's whenever it happened to me. Whenever I
Got you.
went to that trial, I should have done it because I did want to see it all the way through, but I just wanted to kind of finish it because I was just kind of frustrated at the time because that was right after, um, like, okay, so if you can't beat Odio whenever you go up against him, you can't run away from Odio either because you go into like this secret limbo kind of area where you are basically tracked down by this boss that has a very high evasion stat
Hmm.
and a very high defense stat and can one shot any character that it touches. So I just found that to be very unfair. So I decided to, uh, revert back to an old save and just kind of. I was just very frustrated by the fact that there was that massive difficulty spike with the final boss, which should have been expected to me, but I don't know, fighting the Twilight of Edo Japan boss and it being so easy, I thought like, okay, maybe the final boss will be manageable or something, and it wasn't. So
Yeah. Well, I don't think that you're at fault for trying to get through the game and trying to get to the end because one, the game does not communicate really any of this stuff to you. So it would have resulted in you having to look up a guide, which if
yeah,
you're like me, you're kind of like, if I was reviewing a game, I don't know if I would look up a guide necessarily to try to find a way to beat it. I would try to live in it a little bit. And so I think that like what you did is like totally fair. I mean, you don't get codes early. And you know that reviews are timely, so you got to do what you got to do.
yeah,
But how I discovered that was I couldn't figure out. I was running around Lucrece trying to find the entrance for Akida's trial and couldn't find it. And so I looked up a wiki and was like, where is his trial?
okay,
And then I realized you had to teleport out because I was taking the advice you had given me of grind. So every random encounter I got, I was like, I got to fight him because I'm going to need to be leveled. So I never would have accidentally stumbled across that. So it kind of saved my playthrough looking up that guide to make sure I completed all of the trials. But what I would like to do, in all honesty, when I have like a quiet moment and I'm not working on another video or doing something and I can just play a game for funsies, I would like to go back and play the final chapter, round up all of the party members at different times, complete their trials, do the optional bosses. Like, I don't know if you encountered that fish.
was it the Serpent Lady? I think.
Oh, that
I
might have
don't.
been one I didn't encounter.
Okay, I found her only in Archon's Roost.
Okay.
So there was like this serpent lady thing. I can't remember the name for the life of me,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
she was like big and green, and it wasn't that she was hard. It was just the fact that that whenever you get into the encounter, it separates all four of your members, so I can like group them all together and just spam heal and fight through it all.
Yeah.
And the way that her hitbox is created, like it's kind of hard to maneuver around her. So
Okay. Gotcha. Well, I think completing the trials, I went into the final boss fight like level 18, 19, depending on the party member, and I was lucky enough to beat it on the first try. But Obamaru didn't make it. I lost him in the process, so it was just Pogo, Shifu, and Akira.
yeah,
So I was like one person down, and the whole time I was like, man, if I would have just healed him, I would have been able to stand back and just throw shurikens, and that would have been really helpful. So it just took a little bit of time. I had to stay away and, use like, I would use Bing Bang Boom with Pogo and then hang back and use Wii Jump to hit until all of the status effects went away. And then I would do
yeah.
Bing Bang Boom again, create distance, use Wii Jump over and over, and was like, I was like, okay, I just have to keep distance, try to figure out where I need to be, and just slowly just pick them apart.
Well, the way that I defeated him was by using, I can't remember what it was, but it was like this very, very powerful move that the Shinobi is able to use. I had Pogo. Since he has like the highest health stat in this entire game, I believe.
Yeah, it's like
Like so,
600 something.
yeah. So he's able to take a good amount of hits. So what I was doing was actually using this there was like this accessory or this armband that was basically like called like the goldfish launcher or something like that, and
Ooh.
that's all I would use with him, and
Hmm.
it gave him he was able to attack from a range, but also take enough damage that Akira could still go over and heal him a couple times, and I would just use the ultimate move from the Shifu, and I just kind of did that over and over again. With the final boss Odio, during the second phase, um, that one move where he summons like this like Saint something or whatever, where it's like creating like this giant. That move,
Yes.
every time it happened, my heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. I was like, "Oh God, it's over." Luckily,
Yeah.
it wasn't, but
Yeah.
it was like
That was Althea.
that was off. Was it?
Yes. Yeah, it's Althea.
Jeez, I'm so sorry. But yeah, that guy really held that grief in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like what was it? I really appreciated that the combat system had like that feature where like if there's somebody down, you just go over to them and heal them with something like an AOE heal, and then they're back up. Like they're
Yes.
not just down for the count, and the only way that you would lose them is if you don't go and heal them immediately. Like I really loved that. That was kind of like a very forgiving thing, and I really appreciated it because I had a lot of the healing items that would heal everybody in the stage. So whenever there was like two or three people down from the Saint Althea move, I literally just healed everybody back up and went right back into the fight. The one thing I will not give to this game in terms of its combat towards that final boss though was I hate final bosses that have a lot of health, can do a lot of damage, and can heal themselves. I hate that with a
Mm,
fiery passion.
yeah.
Like I don't know if that happened to you during the encounter, but it was like what was it? If you hit the eyes with like a certain attack in the first phase, like they do like this attack where it drains health from somebody.
Uh-huh.
He was doing that almost every single turn during that second phase. So it was
Yeah.
completely clearing my progress out, and I was just like, "Can no more, please." I hate that so much.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I ganged up on those eyeballs. I was like, I'm
yeah,
just gonna meticulously take them out, and I realized I can move them. So certain
yeah,
attacks would push them away, and I would push them into a corner and hang back and just like use Wii jump and all of my like super powerful ranged attacks that I had, like the heavenly attack. I forget what the whole name of it is that the Shifu knows. I would use
yeah,
that because you can attack from a pretty far distance. I would use Judgment Day with Akira, and occasionally, like I would use Judgment Day while after I had healed everybody, and then that one would take a while to charge. It would use it, do a pretty big hit, and then go around, heal everybody, and then just repeat that cycle. But the entire time, just like the heavenly move, just chipping away at the health constantly. That was
yep,
my strategy. But I think that the final chapter, having access to everyone's inventories, and that's what I think would have been beneficial about rounding up all the party members, would have been getting all of their stuff in my inventory even after I took them out, because I
yeah,
could have taken some of the Sundown Kids items. I could have taken some of, I could have pieced together some of these extra items and gotten more of a benefit. But if I'm being honest, I think I pretty much showed up and whooped Odio's ass.
yeah.
So
You cleaned house. You cleaned house. Like there's this one room in the castle. It's like all the way off to like the right side of the map where it's like this giant armory, and I literally used almost everything in there as like my core equipment, and then whenever I went into the trial of the key and got the very and I just gotta say something real quick about the trial of the key. I love the fact that it sort of guides you, but you have to pay attention to what the guidance actually is. The
yes,
fact that it's not showing you like, oh hey, the little glowing dot on the mini map. No, nothing like that. It's literally like the water has like these little traces of a certain color that you have to follow. And
yes,
I loved that as a concept.
yeah,
I don't see that in a lot of games, so I really
yeah,
appreciated that. I just wish I
yeah,
could have done the rest of the trials the way we could have gotten
yeah,
more of that awesome experience, because I was able to enter the houses in the village for the Trial of the Wisdom with Cube. So I was able to see like the very cool art style. So I don't know why it wouldn't let me do it. I'll probably try and do it again. Like I said, probably tonight, to be honest, because I do want to see what playing it would be like with Orsted, as
Yes.
well as seeing what the rest of
Same.
the trials would be like.
Agreed. Yeah, that's definitely at some point before the end of the year, because I'm going to do a game of the year list and do a video for game of the year, and I want to. Is that your cat back there?
Yes.
Cool. I want to go back and after I rolled credits on Pokemon Legends Arceus, I didn't realize how much post game content there was, and there was a whole section of that game that I didn't see. So I need to go back and I need to play through some of that post game stuff, and then I want to go back and do Orsted's chapter, final chapter, and kind of wrap that stuff up before I really hone in that list. But currently, right now, I think, let me grab my phone really quick. Live Alive is, where is it in my list here? Top games, it is the number 4 spot. So right now, it's Triangle Strategy, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, Live Alive, and Pokemon Legends Arceus. But before, I know there's a lot. There's like God of War Ragnarok and Tactics Ogre Reborn and a couple of other bigger games that the Callisto Protocol and stuff that I'm really looking forward to getting to. But before we wrap up, let's go ahead and do final thoughts. Live Alive currently sits at 81 on Metacritic for Nintendo Switch. How would you rate the game? I know that you wrote a review, so people definitely go read his review. It's really well written, awesome. But sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The score that I give was 85, but that's both a personal and objective rating, because obviously I did hate some of the major difficulty spikes without a way to really escape some of them, like with Odio or what's his face in the prehistoric era, like
Pogo.
The boss that you fought that you had to fart on all the time.
Yeah. I can't remember that fool's name.
Yeah, like those 2 sections of the game were the only time that I ever actually thought to myself, this needed some tender loving care. I completely admire the fact that whenever a development team is able to go back to a classic or something like that and completely remake it, I really do advocate for, like, don't mess with the art whatsoever. Like, make sure that it's like 1-to-1, just bring it up to the modern era, maybe add some improvements, but don't like massively change it, because I'm not really that big of a fan of what they did with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I haven't played it because of the fact that I've seen the changes to the story and I don't really agree with it, even though it's more or less because of some of the elements of the story and Advent Children, but that's another discussion for another time. But I would have loved to see, if there was an option to, that they would have at least added some, this is the point of no return. Would you like to save before entering the cave because you're going to get stuck here or something like that,
Yeah.
Some stuff like that would have been good, as well as a problem for people who are going to be less patient than us. The people that throw controllers or say, screw this game, I'm going to go trade in a GameStop and get something else or something like that. The people that have less patience than us, I try to put myself into that mindset. And I understand, and I would see, like, okay, I can't beat Odio. Let me go back and train a little bit. Why am I stuck in this limbo area with this boss I can't kill? That kind of stuff I know would completely anger somebody. And if they didn't save, they would be stuck having to redo that entire final chapter. So 8.5 is more or less because everything in the game's so dang good. It's just those couple of instances were kind of I just can't get behind those, especially if you had the opportunity in the remake process. If this was like a remaster and you couldn't really do stuff like that, I can understand, but they were, let's say, 1-to-1 complete remake on the Nintendo Switch with, Unreal Engine. It's not like they took the cartridge and just kind of ported everything over, So
yeah.
I completely agree with I do agree with the 81 score on Metacritic. I feel like that's deserved. I did call it a brilliant, frustrating classic because it is frustrating, but it is brilliant. Like the it's just the fact of like 8 different stories and like 8 different time periods with 8 different completely unique characters, their own like settings, people that you can just love their own customization. And we didn't even talk about the menus. We have to real quick.
Oh yeah,
The main menu where it has like the fire all over like the icons and everything like that. Dude, it
yeah.
is so cool. Also,
The
little
UI is
style,
great.
like it is so impressive. It is incredible. So that's why I call it a brilliant classic because it's like this is brilliant. I kind of went into it knowing that this was the game that inspired Octopath Traveler on the Switch, so I kind of wanted to see like the similarities, and I kind of noticed that. Like obviously, Octopath Traveler is all in the same world and time period, but with like an equally frustrating final boss that I've still yet to beat. But hey,
Oh, okay.
whatever.
I still need to play Octopath. That's in the
I'd recommend
backlog. Okay, cool. I tend to I'm an X-Play kid, so I rate like out of 5. And I think my gut says like 4 out of 5. I think that there's room for improvement. In that like I know that it's a classic, so they're not really going to improve that, but like the quality of life things that like if you're going to remake this game, like you're saying, like I know that there's like a degree of it's a classic game, leave it as is, but I don't like when I almost have to rely on a guide to figure out certain things, because like I'm just there are things that I'm not going to do just tooling around. Like I was never going to teleport with Akira and just never knowing that that's how I was going to find their trial.
Yep.
That's like a little frustrating, and I think it's cool that there's like all of these like mysterious things that are happening, but there's a little bit of like stuff with that I'm like, but it's also so damn good that maybe 4.5 out of 5, but I tend to try to lean towards whole numbers. So I don't know. It's
really hard to fault the game itself. It's just like we both said, like the quality of life. Like obviously, like nowadays, people, it's just stuff back then. The way that it worked, like obviously, you would be more willing to replay a whole part of a game if you had to, because back then you would actually have to restart the game all the way over if you died or something like that. So that was just part of the culture back then. We've kind of moved forward, the last, I think it's like 18 years. Sorry, like 28 years.
Yeah.
28 years.
I'm bad at math, so don't ask me.
Yeah, so 28 years. Probably gonna be wrong anyways, but still, like, we've moved past, like, in the last couple of decades, like, so much quality of life improvements. I'm not saying, like, oh, change the combat system so it's easier or something. No, like, don't mess with the actual art itself. Just add some stuff that could help people who are picking it up nowadays at least be able to enjoy it at their own pace.
Yeah.
And not feel like they're just playing a classic,
Yeah. I did do the math on that. It was 28 years.
Okay. At least my brain's working somewhat today.
Yeah. My calculator might have popped up in your camera spot there, so I apologize if that happened. But
that's fine.
But yeah, I think if you have a Switch and JRPGs interest you, or even maybe if they don't, like, to me this year, I got out of my comfort zone and I played games like Triangle Strategy and Live Alive, and I even checked out the Dio Field Chronicle, which I never would have. I played the demo. I think I'm still gonna play it to see, because I know that it's like a RTS style thing. I said it was more like active strategy, because it didn't feel like you're not commanding whole armies, so it didn't feel like real-time strategy in that regard. So I thought active strategy felt a little bit more accurate.
Yeah.
But I've been getting out of my comfort zone and not just playing, first-person shooters and, third-person action-adventure games and broadening my horizons a little bit. And I'm really glad that I did, because otherwise I don't know if I would have played Live Alive. And it's one of my favorite experiences this year. And I think that if you have a Switch and you haven't used it in a while and you're like, you know what, I want to check something out, like, don't hesitate.
Yeah, this game automatically too. Like, it's actually cheaper than most games on the market too. Like, it's only $50.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's underselling it a little bit, and I think Square undersold the game itself too. Like, obviously they did really bombastic marketing after, I think whenever they announced it in that one Nintendo Direct earlier this year, like they went all in on the marketing for it. But like right after that, I can't remember. I think it was like Macho that said like he didn't even know the game actually launched because there was like no advertisements.
Oh wow. Huh.
Yeah. Luckily though, like since I'm on Twitter every now and then for business purposes, I actually saw that Live Live has been trending recently, and I'm like, okay, that's good, that's really good, and it deserves the love. So, but
Absolutely.
even then, like if you're strapped for cash, you can at least see that if you try the demo at the very least,
yes,
it gives you a really good taste of what's to expect.
Yeah, and like I said, the distant future section of the demo sold me on it.
Yep.
It showed me that this game was going to do more than I thought it was going to do, and story is huge for me. And as soon as I saw the depth the story was going to get into and where it was going to go and the different facets it was going to explore, I was like, okay, there's no way I'm not going to play this game this year. I need to. So I'm glad I did. But I'll kick it to the audience for a second. What did you think of Live Alive if you played it? Let us know in the comments below. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoy our conversations, and I don't know if you're going to play the Diofield Chronicle or we'll have to kind of sit down and like figure out what games you're going to play the remainder of the year so we can figure out what's the next review discussion spoiler cast we can do together. Maybe Tactics Ogre Reborn, or I don't know, maybe there's something different we can get out of the JRPG area.
I'm a little leery on Tactics Ogre. I might try it if it's the right price. I don't know how much it costs. I'll check it out whenever that's available. The Diofield Chronicle, I don't think I'm going to be picking up, but I do want to recommend it to the audience though. I have played the demo front to back, and that's actually my next article, just kind of like giving my impressions on it. Its combat system is very interesting. It is this is for a live discussion, but whatever. It's like if anybody's played Dragon Age, like it's kind of like that combat system, but in like a top-down RTS kind of environment with like very streamlined zones, like in a tactics game, with Final Fantasy summons. Like being able to summon Bahamut, like that's actually really cool. I will give them that.
Yeah.
So I would recommend it to the audience that obviously play the demo for yourself and see if you will vibe with it. But I do recommend playing it even if I'm probably not going to.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I just got the warning that my AirPods are about to die, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Before we really wrap up, let the people know where they can find you, Joe.
I am Joseph Repko on lordsofgaming.net, the same place that Lord Ben here is actually writing for as well. And I am at FlameLognet on Twitter, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, definitely check out his writing. Really good pieces, like opinion pieces, really good reviews. Follow him on Twitter for sure. Underratedly funny. You don't get enough credit for how funny you are. So I really enjoy interacting with you on Twitter and talking to you in these chats. They're a lot. You're a fun person to talk to.
Yeah, I was low-key wanting to call you out on, because like what is it? You said that you really love the ending chapter of Live Alive, but I have evidence on my Discord saying otherwise.
So I was really. This is what happened. I was sleepy and cranky and jumped into it, and I was like, this is really frustrating. But then I went to bed, and I made a point, no alarms. I wake up when I wake up. And I woke up the next morning, made a cup of coffee, sat down, and started playing it, and actually really started to understand it, and was like, didn't feel rushed to beat it. I was like, I have all day. And I think that helped me just immerse myself in it and appreciate it.
I'm just messing around.
Yeah,
bud.
I know. But I wanted to defend myself a little bit, because you do have those messages, and I never said anything else otherwise. So you could just put me on blast. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Again, if you enjoy review discussions and spoiler casts like this, you can show your support by subscribing to Hitbox Detective on YouTube and following me on Twitter at Hitbox Detective. Thank you so much for your support. Take care of yourselves, and remember, lead with love and stay hydrated. Thank you.
Have a great day, y'all.